A killer hid the truth in daylight. Welcome to Clue Law. I'm your host, Vale. Drop your location in the comments. I love reading everyone. Now, into the case. If you're looking for a sure way to make Nero Wolfe scowl like a thunderhead, try showing up at the old brownstone on West 35th Street at 10 minutes to 1, with a coat wet from a November drizzle and a face that says you've been chased the whole way downtown by something you can't afford to let catch you. That was exactly what happened. It was one of those gray New York afternoons when the sky looks like it's been rubbed with an eraser and doesn't mind how you feel about it. Fritz was in the kitchen with one of his slow, holy rituals in progress. You could smell the beef stock from the hall as if it had money on deposit with the air. I was at my desk in the office, polishing off a letter that needed to sound more respectful than I felt, and Wolfe was in the yellow chair in the front room with a book propped on his belly, letting the world spin without his assistance. The bell went. I glanced at the clock. 10:50. The sacred hour. The 10 minutes between 10:50 and 11 belonged to Wolfe's orchids the way certain devout folks belong to their churches. Even if a man staggered in from the street bleeding, the receptionist policy was still after 11. I was already rising with my mouth half open to shout toward the hallway for whoever it was to come back later. Then the bell went again, sharp as a hat pin. Not a neighbor kid with a dare, not a delivery boy with bad timing. That second jab had panic in it. I opened the door anyway. Fritz was too decent to make it to the front in time, and Wolfe was too immovable to try. So it was on me. The man on the stoop was in his mid-40s, maybe, medium height, with a narrow face that didn't have any fat to spare. His hair was dark and wet, combed back and failing to stay polite in the damp. His overcoat was a good one, but not new, and he wore it with the kind of negligence you see in people who once had more money than they do now and haven't revised their habits. His eyes did the work first, darting past me into the hall as if he expected to see a gunman or a debt collector stepping out from behind the umbrella stand. "Mr. Goodwin?" he said. That was a tick in his favor. Most people know Wolfe's name and guess I'm the janitor. The ones who know mine have done a little homework. "That's right," I told him. "You're early." "I know." He licked his lips, then shoved a gray card toward me. "My name is Felix Morel. I must see Mr. Wolfe. Can't wait." The card had a nice weight and a clean engraving. Felix Morel, Director, Morel Imports. I'd heard the company name. Small but sharp. Mostly spices and specialty foods coming in from Europe and the Caribbean, the kind of stuff that shows up in fancy grocery windows with gold lettering. I let the card sink into my pocket and said, "The rule here is after 11. That's not a joke. It's an orchid problem. This is a life problem." He looked at me so hard it almost qualified as physical contact. "Please." 10 minutes. Below the edge of his overcoat, his right hand was trembling the way a man's will when he's thinking about the wrong woman. He didn't look like the collapsing type, but he did look like somebody who had spent the last 3 hours deciding between running and surrendering, and hated both. I told myself that 10 minutes wouldn't kill anybody unless they were already en route. I stood aside. "Come in, wipe your feet. Wolfe will love you if you don't drip on the rug." He did the wiping like a man taking instructions on a battlefield, then stepped inside and glanced around, still jumpy. I led him to the office because if there was going to be an explosion, I preferred it away from the orchids and closer to my desk phone. "Sit." I pointed to the red leather chair. "I'll inform the management, and if he refuses to see you, I'll send you to a psychiatrist and take a small commission." That got a weak half-smile out of him, the first sign of circulation I'd seen. I went through the hall toward the front room. Wolfe was still in his chair, his book open to the same page. He didn't turn his head. He didn't have to. If you've lived with a man as big as Wolfe as long as I have, you can detect the shift in his attention the way sailors detect a change in wind. "Archie," he said without looking up. "The doorbell has been rung twice." "You're good." I leaned in the doorway. A man named Felix Morel. He's 10 minutes early, wet and frightened. I let him in because he looks like he might burst into flames if he waits." That made Wolfe lower the book exactly an inch. If there's a manual for Wolfe reactions, inch lowering is in the section called Mild Interest. Proceed with caution. "Morel," he repeated. "Morel Imports. Same. You know him." "I know of him. The company has supplied excellent mace and anise to a number of establishments I respect." Wolfe's eyes came at last to me. "Is he ill?" "Only in the American sense. Nervous. No visible fever." Wolfe stared through me for a moment, doing the internal adding and subtracting he never acknowledges aloud. Then he shut the book with a soft thump, as if putting a lid on a box of bees. "Very well. Bring him here. And Archie?" "Yeah. No coffee?" "Not now." That told me something. Wolfe doesn't decline coffee when he's truly bored, because he'll drink it just to pass the seconds. When he declines coffee because of timing, it means critical thinking is already underway. I went back to the office. Morel had remained seated, but he wasn't resting. He was perched like a bird on a ledge, ready to either fly or fall, and his gaze flicked to me as if he'd been holding his breath till I returned. "He'll see you," I said. "Front room. Step easy. Don't make any jokes about orchids unless you want to die poor." Morel stood and followed me down the hall. He kept looking at the walls, the banister, the stairway, like he thought one of them might be rigged. When we entered the front room, Wolfe was already there, upright, hands on the arms of the chair, his bulk arranged into the kind of stillness that makes visitors feel like they've stepped into a courtroom. Morel hesitated in the doorway. I gave him a gentle nudge with my elbow and sat in my usual chair near the desk, where I could watch both faces without turning my head. "Mr. Morel," Wolfe said. He didn't offer a hand. Wolfe doesn't. The man crossed to the chair opposite Wolfe and sat without being asked, the way you do when you're afraid you might not be able to stand later. "I apologize for the hour," he began. "No apology is needed unless it is accompanied by withdrawal." Wolfe's voice was smooth but not warm. "You have been admitted. Speak." Morel breathed in as if the air had lead pellets in it. "I don't know how to say this without sounding insane, Mr. Wolfe. I was told you don't mind insane things if they're true." "Truth is never insane." Wolfe lifted his eyes a hair. "But you may be. We will see." Morel swallowed. "Someone is trying to ruin me. Not in the ordinary way with competition or gossip. I mean to destroy me completely. My company, my name." Wolfe didn't blink. "That is common, not interesting. Why are you here?" "Because it started inside my own building." His right hand clenched on his knee. "And because I think it's already inside yours." Wolfe's eyelids narrowed slightly, like a camera adjusting focus. "Explain," he said. Morel went on. 3 weeks ago, Morel Imports lost a shipment from Marseille. Not misplaced, not delayed, lost. A whole container of saffron, vanilla beans, and peppercorns. Insured, yes, but not entirely. The loss would hurt, but it wouldn't kill us. Then last week, my accounts department discovered that nearly $50,000 had been diverted through a vendor chain I've never heard of. Not a clerical error, a deliberate reroute. We traced it to a login under my assistant's credentials. "Your assistant?" Wolfe asked. "Yes. Avery Pine. He denies it." Morel's eyes jumped to me, then back to Wolfe, like a man tossing a ball to be sure someone still catches it. "Avery has been with me for 6 years. He's competent, dull, and loyal. I would have bet my left hand he couldn't pull a scam if he had instructions. But the evidence is there, a forged approval with my signature, a trail that points to him. He swears he was framed." "And you believe him?" "I don't know what I believe." Morel's voice sharpened. "That's why I'm here. 2 days ago, a buyer from the Iama Waldorf called to ask why we'd sent them a batch of contaminated cardamom. Contaminated, Mr. Wolfe. Laced with something that made their chef sick and sent the kitchen into quarantine. Wolfe's eyebrows lifted a millimeter. That, in Wolfe's language, is a drum roll. Poisoned? They didn't say poison. They said foreign alkaloid trace and threatened lawsuits. The health department came. The press might follow. I checked our stock. The lot number came from a shipment that never left our secure storage. Someone tampered with it inside the warehouse. That spice was intended for a dozen clients. If the Waldorf hadn't caught it. He stopped there, and I could see his hands shake harder. Wolfe said softly, "Continue." Morel pulled a small object from his coat pocket and set it on the little side table between them. It was a glass jar about the size of my fist, sealed with a black lid. I leaned forward involuntarily. The jar was filled with what looked like pale brown seeds. "Do you know what that is?" Morel asked. "Yes," Wolfe said. "Tonka beans." Morel looked startled. "You recognize them." "I have eaten them, sparingly. They are illegal in this country when used in food." "That's right, illegal. But someone has been slipping crushed tonka into our nutmeg supply. It gives a pleasant smell. It also contains coumarin. In large amounts, it can damage the liver. There are regulations. If Morel Imports is found distributing adulterated goods, your company will be shut down," Wolfe finished. "You will be indicted. Even if you are innocent, you will be ruined, perhaps for years." Morel nodded rapidly. "Exactly." Wolfe's gaze rested on the jar. "You brought me contraband. I brought you proof." Morel's voice went brittle. "I found that jar this morning. It was tucked behind our nutmeg crates like a rat in straw. I have no idea who put it there. I have no idea how long it's been there. But I know I didn't authorize it, and neither did anyone I trust." Wolfe sat back a fraction. "So you need me to identify the culprit within your organization?" "Yes." Morel leaned forward. "But there's more. Last night I came home late. I live alone. I found my apartment door locked, but the chain inside hooked. The chain, Mr. Wolfe. Someone had been in there and left by sliding it shut behind them. Nothing stolen. Not that I can tell." Morel's face tightened. "Except one thing. A recipe notebook I keep in the kitchen. It's a habit. I test spice blends for new products, keep notes. That notebook was gone. Nothing else, not even my watch." Wolfe's chin dipped. "You suspect your food is being sabotaged by someone seeking to use your blends for their own benefit?" "No," Morel said, "because they didn't take the recipes that matter. They took the one I started a week ago. A notebook with 5 pages, filled. Nothing of value. Unless they wanted me to know they can get to me anytime they like." Wolfe looked at him steadily. "That is plausible. Who would profit from your ruin, Mr. Morel?" Morel opened his mouth, shut it, then opened it again like a man walking into a cold river. "4 people," he said quietly. "One is my business partner. One is my warehouse manager. One is a former lover who knows enough about our supply to make noise. And one is my sister." That was a nice messy bouquet. Wolfe didn't react, but I saw his eyes go a shade deeper. "You will name them," Wolfe said, "and you will tell me without ornament what your relations are with each. But first, Mr. Morel, you will answer a different question." Morel blinked. "Of course. Why have you said that your problem is already within my house?" Morel's glance shot to me again. When he looked back at Wolfe, there was something close to shame in his face. "Because," he said, "this morning, before I came here, I received a note." "From whom?" "I don't know. It was left on my desk at the office. No envelope. Just a folded card." He pulled it out and offered it to Wolfe. Wolfe took it with 2 fingers and opened it without haste. His lips moved once as he read. Then he handed it to me. The note was neat, printed in block letters. It said, "The poison is hidden in plain sight. Ask the man who keeps his orchids." I looked up. Wolfe was staring at Morel. Morel said in a low voice, "Whoever is doing this knows you, or wants me to think they do, and they know about your orchids." A silence fell, the kind that sounds like a door softly closing somewhere in your skull. Finally, Wolfe said, "Archie." "Yeah. Make sure that jar remains here. Do not allow Fritz near it. I will not have coumarin in my kitchen. You got it." Wolfe's gaze returned to Morel, and his voice dropped into the tone he uses when he has already decided something but is about to make you earn the right to know what. "Mr. Morel, I accept your problem as my own. Not because of the note, nor because you arrived early, but because someone has presumed to implicate me in a matter that touches my household. That is intolerable." Morel stared, half relieved and half bewildered. Wolfe went on, "You will stay for lunch. After that, you will provide names, address your relationships, and comply with my procedures. Archie will begin inquiries this afternoon. I will expect complete candor. If you conceal a fact, you will regret it." Morel nodded quickly. "Anything. Thank you. Do not thank me yet." Wolfe's eyes hardened. "We do not yet know if you are the victim or merely the bait." That was Wolfe for you. When he throws out a line like that, he doesn't just hook the fish. He hooks the whole pond. The bell for the elevator was silent. The front room had its usual smells: old, leather, tobacco, and the faint ghost of orchids from upstairs. Yet it felt different now, like someone had smoked in it after curfew. Outside, the drizzle kept tapping at the windows like an impatient finger. And somewhere between Morel's contraband jar and that cute little note, the sanctity of the brownstone had been dented. When Wolfe's house gets dented, it doesn't stay quiet for long. Lunch at the brownstone is a private sacrament, but that day it felt like we were serving it with the curtains half open. Fritz moved like a man who'd been told there was a snake somewhere in the pantry, but hadn't been told which shelf. He was polite to Morel in that old-world way that makes you think everyone should have been raised by a chef with a conscience. Yet I saw him glance twice toward the front room as if the jar of tonka beans might sprout legs. Wolfe ate with his usual devotion, which is to say, he treated the beef stew and the buttered noodles as an argument to be savored, not a fuel to be gulped. Morel, on the other hand, ate like a man interrupting himself. Every few bites his eyes flicked toward Wolfe, measuring, waiting for the moment he'd be called into court. We adjourned to the office after coffee, Wolfe allowing it now that the orchids had been properly honored upstairs. He settled behind his desk, a king returning to his throne, and I took my chair with my notebook open. Morel sat across from him, stiff in his good coat as if he hadn't realized we were in a room heated by reputation. "Now," Wolfe said, folding his hands on the blotter, "you said 4 persons might profit by your destruction. You will name them and tell me precisely why." Morel drew a breath. "My partner is Leland Rook. We founded the company together 12 years ago. He handles sales and client relationships. I oversee sourcing and quality. We've argued, but we've never been enemies." "Arguments are rarely proof of innocence," Wolfe murmured. Morel grimaced. "I know. Leland wants to expand into packaged retail. I've resisted because it risks dilution and regulatory scrutiny. He believes I'm holding us back. If I were removed, he could push it through. Next, warehouse manager Rosa Zafari. She's been with us 4 years, competent, tough. She hates waste. We cut holiday bonuses last year because of a storm loss. She took it personally." "Resentment," Wolfe said. "Common. Continue." "Former lover, Maris Hale. She's a food writer. Last year she did a profile on Morel imports. We became involved. It ended badly. She accused me of using her for publicity." "And she knows your business?" "More than she should. We talked. I assumed discretion." His mouth tightened. If she wanted revenge, a scandal involving adulterated spices would be, well, delicious. Wolfe didn't flinch at the pun. He probably didn't even notice it. And your sister? Morel's posture changed, as if someone had tugged a thread inside him. Celeste Morel. She owns 18% of the company, inherited from our father. She's never worked a day for us, but she considers herself an equal voice. She wants dividends, always. If the company collapsed, she could sell her shares in a panic to one of our competitors, or force me to buy her out. She's been pressing for a payout I can't afford. So she would burn the house to collect the insurance. Wolfe's voice stayed level. Do these four know each other? Rook and Zaffery work together. Hale knows Rook professionally. Celeste has met them all at events. She disliked Hale. Excellent. A small convivial circle. Wolfe's eyes went to the tonka jar on the side table, then back. Now tell me about your assistant, Avery Pine. 31. College degree? Quiet, meticulous. He runs my calendar, vendor paperwork, shipment logs, compliance. If someone wanted to frame him, there's no better target. Or if he wanted to betray you, there is no better perch. Morel's jaw tightened. I know. Do you keep keys to your warehouse? Key cards. Mine, Rook's, Zaffery's, Pine's, and 2 foremen. We log entry times. Who had access to the Marseille shipment records? Pine and me. Mostly Pine. And who could physically reach the nutmeg stock? Anyone with warehouse access. The spices are sealed in crates, but once they're in storage, opening and resealing isn't difficult if you know what you're doing. Wolfe nodded slowly. The contaminated cardamom, was it from your primary storage or a secondary staging area? Primary. In the secure bay. Wolfe's fingers tapped once like a judge calling for order. Perhaps we are dealing with a saboteur who is both inside and clever, or with an outsider who has inside help. The note you received indicates a wish to draw me into the mire. There is no reason to think I'm actually implicated, unless you have neglected to tell me something. Morel lifted his hands. I haven't. I swear it. Swearing is irrelevant. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. What is relevant is motive. Someone wants your ruin. But instead of the simplest route, anonymous complaints or a straightforward poisoning, they have chosen a layered campaign. Theft, financial diversion, adulteration, intimidation. That suggests planning, patience, and a purpose beyond mere profit. He paused, letting that sink in where Morel lived. Then he continued. Archie will go to your office and warehouse today. He will speak to your partner, your warehouse manager, and your assistant. He will also, if possible, speak to Ms. Hale and your sister. I will remain here, as you see. You will return to your office and behave as if nothing has changed. Morel blinked. You want me to pretend I'm not hiring you. I want the guilty party to continue as if you are not preparing to bite. Wolfe's voice was mild now, which is never a comfort. And I want to see your entry logs, your shipment documentation, and the health department notice regarding the cardamom. You will have them delivered here by this evening. I can do that. Good. One more question. Your apartment chain. Have you told the police? No. Why not? Because I don't trust them not to blunder. And because if this becomes public before I know the shape of it, my clients will scatter. Wolfe nodded. Reasonable. It also keeps you lonely, which may have been the intention. Archie, already putting on my halo. You will take Saul Panzer with you. That made me look up. Wolfe doesn't pull Saul in unless he expects resistance or wants information without footprints. Wolfe said, Call him. Sure thing. Morel stood as if spring-loaded. Should I stay? No, go. Wolfe's voice had the quiet finality of a bolt sliding into place. Your presence here is now a danger to my household. We have agreed that is unacceptable. Morel colored, then nodded, and I walked him out. On the front steps he turned once. Mr. Goodwin. Yeah? If this is about you, if that note meant someone here is involved, then they picked a dumb way to say hello, I told him. Go on back to your office. Act normal. Try not to get poisoned before supper. He gave a tight smile that didn't reach the eyes and went down the stoop into the gray drizzle. When I came back in, Wolfe was already leaning back, eyes half-lidded, thinking like a locomotive at rest, motionless, but with a furnace lit inside. I dialed Saul and got him on the second ring. Saul, it's Archie. You busy? Only with the usual heartbreak. What's up? Client with spicy troubles. I need you in your Sunday suit in about an hour. We're heading to Morel Imports. Saul whistled softly. The spice people? That sounds either tasty or toxic. Both, if we're unlucky. Meet me here at 1:30. When I hung up, I glanced toward the hall, toward the stair that led to the orchid rooms. The note's last line tickled the back of my neck. Ask the man who keeps his orchids. If that was supposed to point at Wolfe, the writer either didn't know him or knew him too well. Either way, somebody had decided to play games inside our sanctuary, and I was about to go see who supplied the board. Saul showed up at 1:30 on the nose, looking like he'd ironed his tie with principles. He's a lean guy with a face that can be friendly or feral depending on what the room needs, and he gave me a quick nod as Fritz handed him his coat like it was a diplomatic credential. Wolfe briefing? He asked. 2 minutes worth. I led him into the office. Wolfe didn't waste any. Mr. Morel's import company is being sabotaged. Theft of a shipment, diversion of funds, adulteration of spices. 4 principal suspects: partner, warehouse manager, sister, former lover. An assistant appears to be framed or guilty. Archie will gather facts. You will assist him in obtaining them without announcing your presence. Saul's eyebrows went up. Adulteration how? Tonka beans in nutmeg. Contaminant in cardamom. Wolfe's mouth tightened. A note has been sent implying my involvement. Determine who would want that implication. Saul's eyes flicked toward me, then back. Got it. That was all Wolfe gave him, which was all Saul needed. We left with a cab and an address on Lower 10th Avenue, an old brick warehouse wedged between a plumbing supply store and a place that sold curtains wholesale. The building wore a fresh coat of paint and a polished brass plaque on the door, trying to look like the kind of place that belonged on Park Avenue instead of in the truck lanes. Inside, the office suite smelled pleasantly of clove and paper. A young receptionist with a headset looked up, smiled professionally, then stiffened when she recognized me from the few times I'd been around with Wolfe on foodie cases. Mr. Goodwin, she said. Hi, Lila. Boss around. Her eyes darted to Saul. I said, this is Mr. Panzer. He's with me. Which was true in a broad spiritual sense. He's in his office. She hesitated. He said if you came, to send you right in. That meant Morel had already called ahead. Or someone had already told him I was coming. Either way, I made a mental note and walked in. Felix Morel looked a shade less wobbly than before, mostly because he'd traded the wet overcoat for an executive vest and a tie that was trying hard. His office had clean lines, a couple of framed vintage spice labels on the wall, and a glass front cabinet full of samples that looked like a candy store for grown-ups. Archie, thank you for coming quickly. His eyes took Saul in with a polite question. An associate, I said. He's with me. I'll handle introductions. Morel nodded. Of course. I didn't sit. I like to keep my feet on cases that smell like they might turn into a sprint. First things first, I said. You've got your partner in. Leland's at a client lunch, back at 3. Assistant? Avery Pine is down the hall. He's unsettled. Warehouse manager? On the floor. Morel rubbed his forehead. Rosa doesn't like being called in for conversations. She thinks talk is a parasite. That makes her my kind of girl. I moved toward the door. Let's start with Pine. We went down a corridor with frosted glass panels and tidy doors. The one that said A. Pine, executive assistant, was half open, like it couldn't commit to privacy. Inside, Avery Pine sat at a desk so neat you could have done surgery on it. He was thin, blonde, and wearing a grey sweater that made him look younger than 31. When we entered, he stood too fast, knocking a pen holder over, then froze with a red face. "Mr. Morell," he said. "No, Archie." "Hello?" "Relax," I told him. "I'm just here to ask you why you're ruining the company and sending chefs to the hospital." His mouth dropped open. "I'm not." I know. That was my welcoming speech. I pulled a chair around without asking and sat. "Let's do the boring version. Tell me about the 50 grand that got rerouted under your login." His hands wrung together once, then he forced them flat on the desk. "I didn't do it. I was home that night. I don't even know the vendor listed." "Your password shared?" "No. Felix, Mr. Morell, made a point of strict protocol. My password was unique, and I never write it down." "Who could have gotten it?" He shook his head hard. "No one, unless someone had access to my laptop after hours, or installed something." "Do you leave your laptop here?" "Sometimes, in a locked drawer." "Who has the key?" "Me and Mr. Morell, and the cleaning contractor, maybe, if they copied it." That maybe floated there like a cigarette burn. I asked him about the Marseille shipment. He had the dates and supplier names at the tip of his tongue, like a man reciting prayers. According to him, the container was logged, cleared customs, and scheduled to be trucked to their warehouse at dawn. The trucking firm's dispatch record showed a pickup the GPS pinged 2 miles away and then stopped. The truck was found abandoned near the West Side Highway with the seal cut and the container empty. "Who arranged the trucking?" I asked. "I did. I used our usual firm. I spoke to the dispatcher personally." "Anyone else on the call?" "No." "Could you have been impersonated?" He blinked. "The dispatcher knows me." "Anybody ever say you sound like someone else?" He gave me a baffled look. "No, I don't think so." We walked through the rest. His relationship with Morell, loyal. With Rook, cordial but strained. With Zachary, hostile because she thought he was a paper boy. With Celeste, rare contact. With Maris Hale, he'd seen her once, didn't like her, thought she asked too many questions about sourcing. When I finished, I leaned back. "So if you didn't do it, someone wanted it to look like you did." "Why you?" He swallowed. "Because I'm convenient. Or because you're close enough to Felix to make the knife hurt." I stood. "Okay, I'm going to talk to Rosa. If you remember anything you're holding back, now's the time to let it out before it chooses a worse moment." He nodded fast. "I will." Outside in the hall, Saul drifted in beside me. He hadn't spoken a word in there. That's Saul. He watches, stores, pounces later. "He's scared but clean," Saul murmured. "Yeah, either that or he deserves an Oscar." We headed for the back stairs that led to the warehouse floor. The air shifted as we went down, getting heavier, spicier, and warmer with machinery. You could hear the thump of pallets, the sigh of shrink wrap, the radio someone had tuned to a station that did more talking than singing. Then we stepped onto the floor. Rows of crates and steel shelving stretched out like a library with burlap covers. Men in gloves moved around with forklifts and hand trucks, and at the center of it all, barking orders in a sharp voice that could slice deli meat, stood Rosa Zachary. She turned when she saw Morell and me, and the look on her face said she'd been waiting 4 years for a chance to tell the office people what she thought. "Felix," she snapped. "What's this?" Her eyes flicked to me and then stayed there, because I'm the kind of visitor you remember. "Hired help," I said. "I'm Archie Goodwin. You're Rosa. We have a little talk coming if you can stand to waste 5 minutes on language." Her mouth did a slow curl that wasn't a smile. I can stand it. Question is, can you? Rosa Zafiri didn't invite us to an office because in her world, offices were where people hid from consequences. She waved a hand toward a narrow aisle between shelving units stacked with cinnamon bark and sacks of allspice, and marched down it like she owned the air we were breathing. Here, she said, stopping beside a pallet of shrink-wrapped crates. Talk. If you ever want to see how much authority a person really has, watch what happens to a warehouse floor when they stop walking. The two nearest forklift guys slowed, then turned away as if they'd wandered into a confession booth by mistake. Morel stayed a step back, letting her and me square off. I said, I hear you like things straight, Rosa. I'm a huge fan myself, so I'll do this without embroidery. Good. I hate embroidery. You're the warehouse manager. You handle intake, storage, stage out, seals, access logs, the works. 3 weeks ago, a Marseille container got hijacked. Last week, cardamom from your secure bay turned up contaminated. This morning, Felix found an illegal tonka stash tucked behind nutmeg crates. That makes your floor the center of a circus. What do you know? Her eyes, dark and sharp, held mine without blinking. I know somebody's messing with us. That gospel has already been sung. I need verses. She snorted. Verses. All right. The Marseille job? Not my fault. The container never hit my dock. We were ready at 6, trucks lined up, bay cleared. Dispatch called at 7, said the driver had a problem. At 8, they said the container was gone. We went over the paperwork. I checked the staging schedule. Everything was normal until it wasn't. Who told you the driver had a problem? Dispatch. Same guy Pine always talks to. Eddie something. Eddie something might be a good start. You ever meet him? No. He's a voice in a box. Did you question the pickup record? The seal check? She lifted her chin toward a clipboard nailed to a post. My people filled out our side. Seal number matches the bill of lading. Truck ID matches dispatch. Driver signed. If that signature's fake, it's a fake that fooled my foreman. I don't like that, but it's the truth. All right. Cardamom. Your secure bay is supposed to be sealed tight enough to keep angels out. How'd something get into those crates? Her jaw worked once. Could be a lot of ways. If you know which pallet it is, you can open a crate with a thin pry bar, slip whatever you want into the inner sacks, and reseal it with new banding. We use tamper bands, but they're only as good as the eyes checking them. If someone on my crew was bribed or scared, they could look the other way for 5 minutes. Or do it themselves. She gave me a look like she was deciding whether to spit. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it could happen. Who has keycard access to the secure bay? Me, Pine, Felix, Rook, and 2 foremen. Cards don't lie unless somebody's got a way to spoof them. Do you? No. Know anyone who might? Not in my house. She tapped a finger on her chest. But I'm not naive. Logistics guys know tricks. What about after-hours cleaning? Night security? We've got a contract crew, 2 people. They scrub, they leave. Security's a company called Argus. 1 guard at night, swaps at dawn. They sign in and out. Any names? Last night was a kid named Tully. Before that, old man Peretz. I wrote that down. She noticed and seemed pleased I wasn't wasting ink. Now, I said, the tonka beans. Felix found a jar hidden behind nutmeg crates. Any idea how they got there? Her mouth tightened. Tonka. That's not a warehouse move. That's a chef move. Somebody who knows flavors, not forklifts. If you're hiding that kind of thing for long, you pick a spot you can reach easy and check without being seen. Behind nutmeg crates is smart. Those pallets don't move unless we're filling big orders. So somebody scouted the floor. Or worked it. She glanced past me at Morel, then back. Look, I'm not accusing anybody without proof. But if I'm you, I don't look at the dock boys first. I look at the people who walk through here acting like they're above dust. Office people. Anybody with soft hands and a key card. I nodded. How's your relationship with Rook? She shrugged. He sells. I store. We bump heads when he promises a client miracles I can't ship on a Tuesday, but he's not a thief. He's just impatient. And Felix? Her sternness softened a shade. Felix is rigid. It can be exhausting, but he cares about quality like it's a religion. That's rare. I respect it. Celeste Morel. Rosa's lip curled. She comes in twice a year with perfume on and opinions loud enough to wake the dead. She doesn't like me. I don't care. Maris Hale. The name did something to her eyes, an old annoyance flickering. Writer lady. She was in here last fall taking pictures, asking about sourcing. She wanted to poke everything. I told her no. She didn't like hearing it. Did she ever come back? Not that I know. If she did, she'd have to sign in. Okay, last question for now. Avery Pine, do you think he pulled the payment reroute or anything else? Her answer came fast. Pine? He'd faint if he jaywalked, but he's got access to the nerve system. If somebody wanted to make a mess, framing him is easy. Who would want to frame him? She stared at me for a long beat, then said, somebody who wants Felix to bleed without getting their own shoes wet. Nice line. I was tempted to steal it, but I let it sit. All right, Rosa. I closed my notebook. If you remember anything else, anything that doesn't fit, any person who was someplace they shouldn't be, any night you smelled trouble, tell Felix, or tell me, and don't try to fix anything on your own. Her eyebrows rose. You think I'm going to play detective? I think you are already. Just don't play alone. She held my gaze, then gave a short nod. Fine. We stepped back into the main aisle. Morel exhaled like he'd been holding it the whole time. You see, he said quietly to me. She's blunt, but loyal. Maybe, I said. Blunt people are the easiest to trust and the easiest to mislead. Depends who's holding the handle. Saul drifted closer, eyes still tracking the floor, the workers, the sight lines. Archie, he murmured, you notice the camera over that bay? He pointed subtly upward. I looked. There was a security camera aimed down the length of the secure bay door. A red light on it blinked steady. Yeah. Lens is clean. Too clean. Somebody wiped it recently. I felt a small, cold click in my stomach, the way you do when a puzzle piece starts to edge toward its mate. Recently as in maintenance? Recently as in someone wanted it to see well. Saul's voice stayed low, or wanted it to see nothing at all, and cleaned it to look innocent. I looked at the bay door again. If the camera had been touched, somebody had been thinking about what it might show. Across the floor, Rosa was already barking at a foreman, back in her kingdom, pretending the air hadn't changed. But it had. Because now, instead of guesses, we had a place where truth might be stored on a tape, assuming the tape hadn't been edited, swapped, or accidentally erased. And whoever had been bold enough to rub that lens had done it on Rosa's turf, which meant the saboteur wasn't just inside the company. They were comfortable there. I asked Morel where the security feeds lived, and he led us along the perimeter to a glass-walled room that doubled as an operations cubby. Inside was a desk with 2 monitors, a battered swivel chair, and a metal cabinet that held the DVR like it was a shameful relative. A thin man in a Navy Argus security jacket sat there with his boots on a rung and a sandwich in hand. He stood when Morel came in, swallowing fast. Mr. Morel, everything all right? Not especially, Tully. Morel kept his voice neutral. This is Archie Goodwin. We need to review last night's footage from the secure bay. Tully's eyes bounced to me, then to Saul, then back to Morel. Sure. There was a glitch at 2. Camera went out for a bit. That landed too neatly to be an accident. I said, a glitch, you don't say. For how long? Maybe 15 minutes? Convenient, you log it. Yeah, I wrote it up. He reached for a clipboard on the desk, offered it like a peace treaty. I didn't take it. Show me the feed. He sat and fumbled with the mouse. The monitors bloomed with 4 squares: loading dock, main aisle, employee entrance, and the secure bay door. The timestamp read 1:47 a.m. We watched. Nothing moved except for a slow drift of light when a truck passed outside. At 1:59, Morell's secure bay door opened. A figure entered, tall, hood up, moving with the unhurried certainty of someone who knew exactly where they were. The guy stayed inside less than 3 minutes. When he came out, he pulled the door shut and leaned toward the camera. The image went to static. Tully lifted his hands as if the static had insulted him personally. See? That's what I mean. Glitch. Yeah, I said. Glitch with a face. The static lasted exactly 8 minutes. When the picture returned, the bay door was closed and the aisle was empty. Who goes in there at 2 in the morning? I asked Morell. No one, he said flatly. I turned to Tully. You see anyone come through employee entrance around then? He clicked to the other feed. At 1:55 a.m., the employee entrance camera caught a person slipping in. Same height, same hood, face turned away. He moved too close to the wall for a clean shot. Keycard? I asked. We don't have card readers on that door, Tully said. It's keyed, only management and security. Meaning you, I said. He stiffened. Yeah. Me. Saul took a slow step closer, leaning in like he was curious about the brand of mousepad. Did you go off your post at 2? No, I was right here. Bathroom break? I went once around 1:30, not at 2. I nodded, because arguing with a man in his own booth rarely produces more than noise. Where's the DVR physically? He tapped the metal cabinet. Here, locked. Key? On my ring? He jingled a big ring of keys. I said to Morell, you keep these feeds how long? 30 days, unless overwritten. But this one isn't overwritten. Good. Make a copy, in triplicate, and don't tell anyone you did. Not Rosa, not Rook, not Pine. If you have to invent a reason for pulling the drive, say there's been a power fluctuation. Make up a story. You're a businessman. Morell nodded, eyes on the static segment, like he wanted to grab it and shake it into talking. I turned back to Tully. You ever see hooded strangers on this floor before? No. Anybody with a key to the employee entrance besides you and your relief guard? Peretz has one, and Argus' supervisor if he visits. That's it. Peretz in at night. He works days, but he could have a copy. Or lose it, Saul murmured. Tully flushed. I didn't lose mine. Maybe you lent it, I said lightly. To a lady, a friend, a guy in a hurry, a guy with a story about a broken lock. No. All right, what about a maintenance guy? Electrician? Anybody in after hours lately? Couple nights ago, a tech came to check the bay alarm. I was here. He left at 11. Name? Don't remember. Argus called him. Argus called him, I repeated, storing it away. We stepped outside. Morell spoke low. That's static. Someone did that deliberately. I can't believe they'd be that bold. Bold is what you get when someone thinks the house is already on fire, I said. Let's see your partner when he gets in, and I want Pine's access logs and your key inventory by tonight. He agreed, and we went back upstairs to his office suite. It was a little after 3 when Leland Rook strode in without knocking, as if doors were optional for him. He was a handsome guy in his early 40s with a salesman's shine. Dark suit, pale blue shirt, hair combed into something that might be called defiance. He froze when he saw me. Well, he said, letting the word stretch. You didn't mention you'd hired a celebrity, Felix. Morel kept it calm. Leland, this is Archie Goodwin. Mr. Panzer. They're helping us sort out the trouble. Rook's smile slid a fraction. Trouble? That's rich. We're drowning in it. And now we're paying Wolfe to lecture us about ethics. Something like that, I said. Sit down, Mr. Rook. I need your version, short and true. He didn't like being told to sit, but he did it, dropping into a chair with the easy sprawl of a guy used to having the floor. Fine. Ask. You want to expand into retail packages. Felix doesn't. That's a motive to remove him. You got another. His eyes went flat. That's not motive. That's disagreement. I don't poison cardamom because a partner's stubborn. Maybe not, but somebody went into the secure bay last night, killed the camera for 8 minutes and left. You have a key card to that bay and you have a key to the employee entrance. Where were you at 2 a.m.? He blinked once. At home, with my wife. I can call her in here if you'd like her to testify. I might. Later. You ever work late here alone? Yes. Sales is not a 9-to-5 fairy tale. Ever come in after hours? Sometimes if a shipment is urgent. But I sign in and I don't wear a hood like a melodrama villain. I watched his hands. They were clean, confident, and still. Not a tremor in sight. That didn't clear him, but it meant he wasn't rattled by the question itself. Either he was innocent or he was a pro. Tell me about Maris Hale, I said. He gave a quick, thin grin. Ah, the writer. She wanted an exposé. Felix wanted a puff piece. I tried to keep the peace. She's sharp, but she's also ambitious. If she thought scandal would sell, she'd grab it with both hands. You two talk recently? No. Not since last winter. She emailed once about a follow-up. Felix told me to ignore it. And Celeste? His face tightened a shade, like a man smelling vinegar. Celeste wants money, always. She'd sell her own shadow. But she's not subtle. If she wanted Felix gone, she'd say so at a board meeting, not sprinkle tonka beans like fairy dust. Fair enough. I leaned forward. Who besides you and Felix could move through this place without getting questioned? He shrugged. Rosa, her foreman. Pine, though he doesn't come down much. Security. Cleaning crew. Any of your clients ever visit late? He laughed once, but it was forced. What, to steal saffron? No. I let a beat pass, then said, You know why I'm really here, Mr. Rook? Because Felix invited a genius into our lives? Because somebody left Felix a note telling him to ask the man who keeps his orchids? That points to my boss. Now why would anyone want to drag Nero Wolfe into a spice war? Rook's smile was gone now. He looked at Morel, then back at me. Because they want a show, he said quietly. They want you all looking in one direction while they do something bigger in another. That was the first honest thing he'd said, I thought. Maybe because he just surprised himself with it, and it told me two things. One, whoever was doing this knew Wolfe's name carried weight, the kind that makes people jump. Two, the game wasn't over. Not remotely. The saboteur had just reached into our brownstone with a finger and tapped the glass to see who turned their head. I stood up. Thanks, Leland. Don't go far. I'll be back with more questions. If any memory pops that you don't like, call Morel. Or call me. Don't call the papers. He gave a stiff nod, and I walked out with Saul and Morel following. In the corridor, Saul said softly, Static at the camera wasn't just a trick. It was a message. Yeah, I said. And I'd bet a steak Fritz is going to cook that the next one's already on the way. We left Morel's suite with the taste of static still in our mouths. Saul took a cab back toward Midtown because he had a habit of vanishing into the city the way a cat vanishes under a bed. Silently, purposefully, and with claws already out. I stayed a little longer at Morel Imports to collect two things Wolfe had asked for, without asking: paper and people. By 4:30, Morel had pine pull access logs and key inventories, and I skimmed them in a conference room that smelled of ginger. The keycard printout was exactly the kind of tidy document you love right up until you notice the one smear. It showed 3 entries into the secure bay last night: Morel at 6:10 p.m., Rosa at 7:02, and Pine at 8:45. After that, nothing, which was either splendid proof that nobody went in at 2 a.m. or splendid proof that somebody had a way to walk through a locked door without being asked their name. "Any of the key cards ever go missing?" I asked Morel. "No, we audit monthly." "Monthly is a warm blanket for a thief. Any duplicates?" "No." "Any staff complain about cards not scanning?" "Once or twice, usually replaced." So either the logs were clean because reality was clean, or because reality had been scrubbed like the camera lens. I'd seen enough clean things today to distrust soap. At 5, I went back to Pine's desk and asked him to print the vendor chain connected to the diverted funds. He did it without fuss and handed me 3 pages of invoices with a faint shake in his fingers. The reroute came through a shell called Westbridge Fulfillment, a name that might as well have been somebody else, for all the history it had. I told him I'd be in touch and let him watch me walk away, which was probably the first good thing that had happened to him all week. Outside, the drizzle had graduated into a steady rain. I was thinking about hooded figures and Argus security and the fact that Tonka beans don't just stroll into nutmeg on their own when my phone rang. I fished it out and saw the brownstone number. "Yeah?" I said. Wolfe's voice came through dry and unhurried. "Archie, are you returning directly?" "Was planning on it. You miss me already?" "I miss my equilibrium." There was a micro-pause. You learn to listen to those more than to his sentences. "Fritz has discovered that the jar of coriander in the spice cabinet is not coriander." I stopped on the sidewalk hard enough that a passerby bumped me and muttered something. "Not coriander." "No, it is coriander in appearance. In aroma, it is not." Fritz is offended. I'm attentive. That was Wolfe speak, for we've been violated. "Where's the jar from?" "Your client's contraband remained in the front room." Fritz, understandably curious, compared the cabinet stock to its label and found discrepancy. He assures me he did not misplace it. "So someone switched a jar?" "Yes." Wolfe's voice dropped to the temperature of marble. "And the intruder knew which cabinet, which jar, and that Fritz would notice. I suggest you come home promptly." "On my way," I said and hung up. I don't like being yanked by nerves, but if somebody had entered our kitchen and played musical jars while I was out sniffing spice warehouses, then we weren't just in Morel's business anymore. We were in Wolfe's house. I hailed a cab and got to West 35th in 20 minutes that felt like 5. When I came in, Fritz met me in the hall with a face like a man who has discovered a fly in his consommé. "Archie," he said softly, "someone has been in my kitchen." "I know, show me." We went in. The kitchen was immaculate as ever, because Fritz runs it like a temple and a laboratory had a baby. But on the counter sat the offending jar. Wolfe was at the table, not in his chair, rare enough that I paused. He wasn't eating. He was staring at the jar as if it were a witness refusing to speak. "What did Fritz find?" I asked. Wolfe gestured with one thick finger. "Smell it." I did. The seeds looked like coriander, but the odor was wrong. Sweet, almondy, with a dark edge. Not unpleasant. Not familiar. "Tonka," I guessed. "Possibly," Wolfe said, "or a close substitute. Fritz has sealed it. He is in the pantry contemplating homicide." Fritz, to his credit, was hovering near the stove with his hands clenched. "It was here this morning," he said. "The coriander. I used it for the lamb. After lunch, I returned to prepare the sauce for tonight. The jar was different. I cannot be mistaken. Any other jars touched? Cabinet out of order? No, only this one. It was placed exactly where the coriander belongs. Wolfe looked at me. The timing is not random. Someone anticipated that you would be absent and that I would be occupied mentally by Mr. Morell's affair. They made an entrance without disturbing the locks, performed a substitution requiring knowledge of our habits, and departed. That is not the work of a casual prowler. Agreed. My mind was already running through the day. Hooded stranger at 2 a.m. in Morell's secure bay, camera static, now a quiet hand in our kitchen. Same style, minimal disturbance, maximal message. Where was the jar before? I asked Fritz. In the cabinet with the other seeds. Second shelf. Front row. So a stranger walked into your kitchen, opened your cabinet, swapped a jar, and walked out. Yes, Wolfe said. Either they possess a key to the house, or they were admitted. That last word landed with a thud, because there are exactly 5 people who regularly come and go without announcements. Wolfe, Fritz, me, Theodore Horstman, and the delivery boy from the florist who thinks he's invisible. None of them were likely to spike coriander. Any sign of forced entry? I asked. None, Wolfe said. Front door locked, basement bolt intact. Fritz's voice trembled, not from fear, but from outrage. The windows, as always, are secured. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Therefore, Archie, we must entertain what Mr. Morell has already been forced to entertain, that the enemy is not merely in his company. He is near. Near as in close to him, I said, or close to us? Both, Wolfe replied. I leaned over the jar again. The smell crawled into my nose and stuck there. It wasn't just an intrusion. It was a suggestion, almost a taunt. Ask the man who keeps his orchids. And now the poison, or the hint of it, was sitting in Fritz's kitchen, hidden in plain sight, where only someone who knew our rituals would count on it being noticed. I straightened. Okay, I'm calling Saul back in, and I want to see those logs Morell's delivering tonight. If whoever did this thinks they're tightening a net around you, they're going to find out the net has teeth. Wolfe's mouth twitched, not a smile, but approval's distant cousin. Good, he said. Meanwhile, I will consider which of our acquaintances understands spices well enough to choose this particular jest. And understands you well enough to make it personal, I finished. Wolfe's eyes stayed on the jar. Precisely. I got back to the brownstone a little after midnight, wet to the knees and fed up to the eyebrows. The village trip had been a mixed bag. Maris Hale lived in a narrow third-floor walk-up that smelled of espresso and self-regard. She'd opened the door in a silk robe like she'd been expecting either a lover or a subpoena, checked which I was, and decided to let me in anyway because curiosity is a writer's incurable rash. She hadn't flinched at the mention of Morell imports. She had flinched, barely, when I mentioned the tonka beans. She called them a flirtation with illegality, then got defensive a shade too fast when I asked if she'd ever used them in a recipe. She admitted she'd been digging into imported spice chains lately, for a piece on regulatory blind spots. She denied seeing Felix in months and laughed out loud at the idea of sneaking into his warehouse. The laugh had bite in it, but no smoke. Most interesting was her irritation about Wolfe. She'd heard about the note. Not from me, from people who talk. She said the line about the orchids was clever and ugly, and that whoever wrote it was trying to stage a morality play. She insisted she wasn't staging anything. If she was lying, she was doing it for reasons other than nerves. I left with 2 things. A sense that she knew more about tonka than she wanted to say, and a conviction she wasn't the hand walking through our kitchen. Her hands were too busy writing, and she liked noise too much for such quiet trespass. So when I came in, I was ready to dump what I had on Wolfe and let him turn it into the kind of pattern he sees the way Fritz sees whether a sauce needs salt. But I didn't make it past the front room before I felt it. The house smelled different. Not bad, not sweet, just altered. Like a note in music taken down half a step, and you'd be hard-pressed to swear which note was right unless you knew the tune by heart. Fritz came from the kitchen door, face grave. "Archie," he said softly, "there is coffee prepared." "Now?" I glanced at the clock. 12:20. "Yes, Mr. Wolfe asked for it. There is also a guest." That stopped me. "Guest? In the office?" I took 2 steps, then another, then pushed the office door open without knocking because I hate surprises in my own house. They were all there. Wolfe behind his desk, centered as a cathedral. Saul Panzer leaning on the side wall, looking like he'd already measured exits. Felix Morel in the red leather chair, pale but upright. Leland Rook on the couch with his ankle on his knee, wearing a salesman's smirk like armor. Rosa Zafari standing by the door, arms folded, eyes flinty. And Celeste Morel, because you could tell she was Celeste without being told. Glossy auburn hair, a tailored coat over a dress that thought it was going somewhere better, and a face that had never forgiven the world for not being impressed enough. In the corner, standing like a man who'd rather melt into wallpaper than into trouble, was Avery Pine. If you want to know what it feels like to walk into a room where everyone's been waiting for the judge and the bailiff shows up instead, that was it. I shut the door, took my chair, and said, "Okay, I'm late. Somebody start the movie from where I missed it." Wolfe looked at me over steepled fingers. "You missed little. You brought me confirmation. About Maris. About the nature of our adversary." Wolfe's voice was mild enough to frighten children. "Ms. Hale's irritation tells me she is not the engineer of this affair. She is a convenient distraction, nothing more." Rook shifted. "Archie, can we cut to the chase? I've got a 9 o'clock breakfast with a client who doesn't care about anyone's parlor games." "Sit still," Rosa said. "For once." He looked at her like he was about to retort, then decided he liked breathing. Wolfe lifted a hand. "This will be brief if no one interrupts me with stupidity. Mr. Morel's company has suffered 3 assaults: the theft of a Marseille shipment, the diversion of funds through a false vendor, and the adulteration of stock with Tonka-derived coumarin and another alkaloid. Additionally, he has been intimidated at home and my household has been trespassed." Celeste sniffed. "You're talking as if someone here poisoned your precious spices. Is that why I was hauled in at this hour? Because your cook misread a label?" Fritz wasn't in the room, thank God, or she'd have discovered a whole new definition of precious. Wolfe ignored her. "The plan is coherent. It is not designed merely to damage Mr. Morel financially. It is designed to create a public scandal that destroys trust in his quality, triggers regulatory action, and compels a forced institutional change. The thief is not content with stealing saffron. He wants control." Rook opened his mouth. Wolfe looked at him. He shut it. "Let us begin with the Marseille shipment," Wolfe said. "I have examined the dispatch records. The truck was registered, the seal number correct, signatures in place, yet the container vanished within 2 miles. This suggests prior knowledge of route and timing. Who had that?" Pine spoke before he meant to. "I arranged it. Only Mr. Morel and I knew the exact pickup time. I didn't tell anyone else." "On the contrary," Wolfe said without raising his voice. "You told Mr. Rook." Pine froze. Rook's head snapped toward him. "What the hell are you talking about?" Wolfe continued calmly. "In the logistics email at 4:12 p.m. on the day before pickup, you forwarded the dispatch window to Mr. Rook at his request. You wrote, 'Leland wants to coordinate client tours.' Do you deny it?" Pine looked stricken. "No," he asked. "I didn't think—" "Of course you did not." Wolfe's eyes moved to Rook. So Mr. Rook knew the time. He also had a key to the employee entrance and secure bay. He also knew which shipment contained the most lucrative spices. "Mr. Rook, why did you request that information?" Rook spread his hands. Because I'm in sales. Clients do tours. It's normal. It is not normal to schedule tours at dawn for a shipment not yet unloaded. Wolfe's voice stayed even. But perhaps you will say you forgot you asked. Fortunately, we need not rely on memory. The Marseille theft required a second act. To make Mr. Morel appear negligent, you needed adulteration to surface near simultaneously. That adulteration was too culinary to be warehouse work. It required a person who knows flavors and who knows what will be catastrophic when discovered. Rosa's eyes narrowed. You're saying some office suit did it? I'm saying the adulteration was done by someone who writes menus for profit. Wolfe turned his head slightly to Celeste. Or someone who commissions them. Celeste stiffened. Excuse me? Wolfe did not excuse her. You have dined at restaurants where tonka beans are used illegally to create a fashionable aroma. You spoke recently to Miss Hale about story opportunities in the spice trade. She told Archie as much, thinking it harmless. She did not tell him that you specifically asked about adulterants that are difficult to detect. Celeste's eyes flared. That's ridiculous. Is it? Wolfe's voice got a shade colder. 2 days before the Waldorf incident, you attended a charity dinner at Le Jardin Noir. The menu included a dessert publicly, described as containing a forbidden bean. You praised it loudly. You have since mentioned to 2 acquaintances that your brother's company is behind the times and needs to be freed of his obstinacy. Felix looked at her, stunned. Celeste. She snapped her head toward him. Don't start. I said nothing I don't believe. You are behind the times. Belief is irrelevant in court, Wolfe said. But you are not my primary culprit. You are a catalyst, perhaps even an accomplice, but not the engineer. You lack subtlety. This campaign required subtlety. Celeste opened her mouth again. Wolfe went on over her like a train. The financial diversion through Westbridge Fulfillment was routed with impeccable knowledge of internal approvals. It was done using Mr. Pine's credentials, which could be acquired only by someone who had access to his office after hours or who induced him to reveal his password. Pine whispered, I never revealed, I know. Wolfe looked toward Saul for a moment, then back. We have learned that Argus Security sent a technician to adjust the warehouse cameras 2 nights before the static event. Argus has no record of such a technician. Therefore, the authorization was forged by someone who understood Argus's internal procedures. Saul didn't speak. His silence was a citation. Wolfe said, Mr. Rook, you have used Argus at 2 other sites you manage for clients. You know their operations supervisor personally. You're on friendly terms with him. Is that coincidence? Rook's smirk had died somewhere between Marseille theft and Argus forged tech. Now he was sweating under the collar. This is insane, he said sharply. You have no proof. Proof does not require confession. Confession is merely convenient. Wolfe reached into a folder. Here is proof. The 8-minute camera interruption last night at 1:59 a.m. was caused by the intruder leaning into the lens and applying a small adhesive disc. A disc with a faint residue of star anise oil. Rosa barked a laugh without humor. Anise, we've got anise by the ton. Not of the Vietnamese variety you keep in the secure bay, Wolfe said. Only one person on your staff routinely handles it without gloves, because he prefers to test aroma by skin contact. Mr. Rook, you are famous among your sales staff for rubbing a star anise pod between your fingers before you walk into a client meeting. Rook stared at Wolfe like he'd been shot with a ping-pong ball and couldn't decide whether to fall down. Wolfe's voice stayed steady. Your oil was on that disc. Your key opened the employee entrance. Your body was on the floor at 2 a.m. You entered the secure bay to tamper with the cardamom pallets that had been selected to ship to high-profile clients. In doing so, you created a public health incident that would trigger inspection and panic. Felix's face had gone white. Leland, why? Rook swallowed. Because you wouldn't move. he said hoarsely. Because I built this company with you and you treat it like a museum. Retail is where the money is. We had an investment offer from Drake & Pell. They wanted scalable packaged lines. They wanted you out of quality control because you were too rigid. If you stayed, the deal died. If you were disgraced, shut down, indicted, whatever, your shares could be bought at a crawl. I'd take control and save what matters. Save what matters, Rosa repeated bitterly. By poisoning people. I didn't poison anyone. Rook hit the couch arm. It was trace levels, enough to fail a test and scare clients. I told Celeste that would force Felix to sell. She didn't like it, but she wanted her payout. She introduced me to Hale to learn what would make a scandal stick. Celeste made a sound halfway between outrage and horror. You used me. You were eager, Rook snapped back. Then his face crumpled as if he'd realized he'd said it out loud. Wolfe let the room breathe. Then he said, the Marseille theft required an outside crew. You arranged that by giving a precise window to a dispatcher you had already bribed. The fund's diversion paid those men and financed your Westbridge shell. The Tonka beans were a slow fuse meant to ensure regulators found a pattern, not a fluke. And because you are a dramatist, you sent notes to Mr. Morel to direct suspicion toward me, believing to distract him and perhaps to amuse yourself. Rook stared at the floor. The note about orchids was childish vanity. Wolfe's voice was contempt in a teacup. You underestimated my tolerance for intrusion. Felix rose, fists balled. You framed Avery. You broke into my apartment. You stole my notebook. I needed you scared and off balance, Rook muttered. The notebook was a message. Like the camera, like the notes, you moved too slowly, Felix. Felix looked ready to cross the room and rearrange Rook's facial geography, but Saul was already beside him, one hand lightly on his arm. Don't, Saul said softly. Wolfe's got the police on the way. Rook jerked his head up. Police? We do not indulge fantasy endings here, Wolfe said. Inspector Kramer will arrive presently. You will be arrested. If you are wise, you will speak to the district attorney about the men who stole the shipment and the Argus supervisor you involved. The charges you face are quite sufficient without adding conspiracy. Rook sagged. You can't prove the Argus part. Saul spoke for the first time all evening. Try me. The doorbell rang right on cue. I went to let Kramer in, and 5 minutes later the office had 2 plainclothesmen and a very tired inspector in it. Wolfe gave his version in neat, brutal sentences, and Saul handed over the camera copy and Argus statements like party favors. Kramer looked at Rook and said, Leland Rook, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and reckless endangerment. Get up. Rook stood slowly. His eyes found Felix's. Maybe looking for mercy, maybe for recognition of their old partnership. Felix gave him neither. He just looked sick. Celeste tried to speak. Kramer silenced her gently, informed her she'd be contacted, and left with Rook and the men. When the house finally exhaled, Rosa Zaffery said to Felix, I told you the soft hands were dangerous. Felix nodded dumbly. Pine was shaking. Mr. Morel, I'm sorry. I never... Felix turned to him, voice raw. You were loyal. I was the fool who didn't see the knife. Wolfe cleared his throat. Everybody looked at him. That's the trick. Even after the bad guy walks out, Wolfe still owns the stage. Mr. Morel, he said, you will undo what harm you can by candor with your clients and cooperation with the authorities. If you attempt to conceal this, the poison will persist longer than any bean. Felix swallowed. I won't, I promise. Good. Wolfe moved his eyes to Celeste. And you, madam, will reflect on a simple arithmetic. Greed plus resentment equals ruin. If you are fortunate, you will pay for your share of it only in shame. Celeste's face was a painting in motion. Rage, humiliation, fear. She opened her mouth, then closed it and walked out without a word. The heels sounded sharp on the hall floor, but not as sharp as the silence she left. Rosa left next after giving Felix a quick nod that looked like loyalty and warning braided together. Felix lingered long enough to thank Wolfe in a voice that had no breath left in it, promised to send payment, and went. Pine followed him, looking like a man who'd aged 3 years in a day, but also like a man who'd just been handed his life back. At last, it was only us again, me, Wolfe, and the brownstone settling into itself. Fritz came in, expression still wounded but with purpose restored, and began clearing the table without being asked. He paused by the offending jar, sniffed it once more, and said with quiet disgust, "Tonka, I thought so." "It will be disposed of," Wolfe said. "Yes." Fritz looked at Wolfe, then at me, and went back to the kitchen to salvage dinner from the evening's intrusion. When he was gone, I said, "So the big question, how did you nail Rook?" Wolfe leaned back in his chair, tired now that he could afford to be. The note implied knowledge of my orchids. The coriander substitution implied knowledge of Fritz. In a pantry full of enemies, only a gourmand with access and vanity would think to strike in that language. Mr. Rook spoke earlier of show and direction. He exposed his character. Later, the anise residue exposed his hand. "He almost got away with it," I said. He was too theatrical to be patient. Wolfe's eyes drifted toward the hallway, toward the kitchen, toward his orchids upstairs. The poison was hidden in plain sight because the culprit wished to admire his own cleverness. That is always a vulnerability. Fritz's voice floated from the kitchen. "Dinner in 10 minutes, please." Wolfe's face softened in the way it only does for food and flowers. He looked at me and said, not as a punchline, but as a verdict, "A man who corrupts what others consume corrupts more than bodies. He corrupts trust. I have little sympathy for such ambition. It is appetite without discipline." I grinned. "Sounds like you're talking about Rook." "I'm talking about all of them," he said, "including on occasion ourselves." That was Wolfe's philosophical closure, neat, heavy, and aimed at the human condition like a dart. We went to the dining room. The brownstone was quiet again. Not innocent. Quiet never is after a trespass, but steady. The orchids would have their hour in the morning. Fritz would reclaim his cabinet, and I'd bet my next paycheck that somewhere in Morell's warehouse a pallet of honest spice would smell sweeter tomorrow for having survived a man's vanity. As for me, I sat down to dinner feeling like the tune was back in key. And if the flavor on 35th Street had changed, it had changed back.